Hi guys, welcome to another edition of the Masters Fantasy Football League's Dynasty Spotlight Series. Before we hop into today's show, just want to take a minute and tell you guys, if you're not in any Dynasty Fantasy Football Leagues, we highly recommend you join one. We have tons of fun here year-round at Masters. We're trading all off-season. We have our rookie drafts in the summer. Just a great way to always stay connected to the NFL and just never let the fantasy football season end.
Absolutely.
I think we've got over 600 leagues here at Masters Fantasy Football. Never folded a single one. Looking to add plenty more this offseason. So come join us, be a part of the family, and join a league.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with all that being said, let's dive into today's show. This came requested by some of our viewers out there. Ohio State running back Trey Sermon. We all know he bursted on the scene at Ohio State a little late after transferring from Oklahoma. We got him listed about, 6 foot, 220 pounds?
Yeah, it's varied from the sites we've seen, but yeah, around there seems to be his weight there.
So now the Doc here is going to break down his game for us a little more.
Right, so Trey Sermon, it's funny because I wasn't really a huge fan of him at Oklahoma either, and when he went to Ohio State I was like, well, maybe it'll be good for him. And then he just did really nothing the entire season. But then the Northwestern game came around, and man, he looked excellent. And I think you got to see him healthy and finally into the system. It just seemed to all click at the right time for him. I think he's a really solid all-around running back. I don't think he has great speed. We've seen some of these runs that he's broken off in these games where he gets caught from behind, but he's got, I think, a good enough burst to get through the hole initially and make a big play. I just don't know if he's got the long speed to finish that off. Good contact, running through contact, I should say. He can run between the tackles really well, which is obviously a big plus. He showed decent receiving skills as well, which is a positive. And, I think he has pretty good agility for a guy of his size as well, where he made some pretty nice moves to make some guys miss. I think all around, like I said, he's just a good running back. He can do pretty much everything. Wouldn't necessarily say he's an elite running back, but I think he could be a solid contributor in the NFL. And for that reason, I'm going to go with my first pro player comp. He kind of reminds me of another Oklahoma running back, Joe Mixon, but maybe a little less athletic. And I still think Trey Sermon will test relatively well, but I feel like Joe Mixon's a little higher level of athlete, but I feel like their size and their games are relatively similar. And if Trey Sermon can ever get to a point where Joe Mixon is as a player, I think that would be a big success if you got him.
Yeah, I completely agree. One little part of their games that remind me of each other is they kind of run a little upright, which sometimes that's a negative. My pro player comp from him I actually don't think runs upright at all. That's Josh Jacobs, which again I think if he reaches anything like Joe Mixon or Josh Jacobs, that'd be a pretty good end game for him. Those are two really good running backs. But as you mentioned, I don't know if he's quite that good of a prospect. I actually didn't mind him at Oklahoma, but then when he transferred to Ohio State and just couldn't get on the field, it just kind of started to worry a little bit. But then it was nice to see him burst onto the scene late and have a lot of success in the Northwestern Big Ten championship game and the first game of the playoffs before, unfortunately, going down in the national title. But definitely a solid do-it-all back. I don't think he's elite in any one area. Definitely think he'll be a day 2 pick, somewhere round 3, 4, 5,
Yeah, it could be day 3.
Or I'm sorry, day 3.
Right,
yeah, day 3 is what I meant there.
He definitely earned himself some money. I wouldn't be shocked if he was a day 2 pick, though. With how good he looked those last few weeks.
Yeah, I always forget the new format. We got the second and third round on day 2, and then
of course.
So really, I think rounds 3 to 4, 3 to 5. But so fringe day 2 or early day 3 pick is where I see him. I think best case scenario, he just goes somewhere that flat out needs a running back, somewhere like the Jets, somewhere like Miami, somewhere he's going to have a true opportunity to get on the field early. In reality, though, I think at the end of the day, he's kind of just a committee back. But, if the landing spot's somewhere more where they flat out need him, I think, obviously, the fantasy upside is going to be more so there. So for those reasons, I kind of like Miami and the Jets as my top 2 destinations.
Right, and I'm going to stay in the AFC East. I kind of, after watching the Bills the other day, it was tough to watch, and I probably supported Devin Singletary a little more than others in the preseason, But I also liked Zach Moss as well. Obviously, Moss was injured. Singletary just didn't quite get the job done. I mean, we saw a heavy dose of TJ Yeldon, which we didn't really expect.
Yeah, that was shocking.
I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Buffalo scooped him up in the 3rd round just to add another 3rd round back or 4th round. I feel like both those guys were 3rd, 4th round guys, Singletary and Moss. But if Sermon can do what he did those last few weeks at Ohio State in the pros, and I think he's got good skills to be a solid back. Buffalo, I think he'd be an upgrade and he'd be in one of the better offenses in the league right away, which would be huge.
Yeah, so I don't hate that at all, but honestly, in some ways I think Zach Moss could be even better than Trey Sermon.
I do too.
But completely agree with you on Devin Singletary. It was actually kind of crazy to see how much TJ Yeldon cut into Devin Singletary's workload in the playoffs. TJ Yeldon was a healthy scratch most weeks, who I actually think is a decent all-around back. And in some ways, TJ Yeldon's kind of a good comp for Trey Sermon. Runs a little upright, too, the more I think about it. That could be my pro player comp, but we like the better ones here, like Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs. A little more to be excited about.
Right. I will say, too, that, for all those Zach Moss lovers out there, I've invested in him well. I do think he can be a pretty good running back for the Bills, too. I'm not saying I'm out on him yet. I just think, based on what I saw, they could use another running back. And, I don't necessarily think he would complement Zach Moss, but, it'd be just another physical kind of all-around back to add to Buffalo, which I think they need.
Yeah, agree with you there. So let's play the game we always play, assuming he lands in one of these destinations that we like, maybe not best case scenario, but somewhere he gets drafted, we're like, that's a good spot for him. Where could you see yourself taking him in a Masters rookie draft this summer?
So that's an interesting one. And I don't even know that in a great situation I would take him in the 1st round, just because I feel like I'm a little unsure on him still as a prospect. Like I said, we saw those 3 good games, but, again, I wasn't huge on him at Oklahoma, and it is a little concerning that it took him so long to get on the field, even though new team, COVID offseason, all that stuff.
It's true.
I don't know. I think the upside is there. Maybe late 1st round is probably the very earliest I would take him, but most likely early 2nd round is where I would see him in these drafts.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that as well. Early 2nd off the top of my head is, where I'd peg him. Obviously, some other prospects land in really bad spots.
Yeah.
Could do a 180. I mean,
there's a lot of different aspects of the draft that could change that.
And just going back to a year ago, I know you always liked Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but there were a lot of people around this time last year who would talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire and probably say the same thing, early 2nd round Dynasty star pick. And then what happens? He lands in Kansas City and, everything goes wild and he becomes the 1.1 almost unanimously.
Yeah.
So you never want to say never, but for me, I think probably early 2nd. Really don't see him slipping up in the 1st, but hey, you never know.
Yeah.
Anything could happen.
Absolutely. It's the beauty of fantasy football.
It is. That it is.
So then I think that brings us to our last question.
It is one of our favorite questions.
Yeah. And this one might be one of our most interesting.
I know.
Do you think Trey Sermon will be, fantasy relevant in 3 to 5 years?
So I don't like being mean. I'm a very nice person.
I know. I always want to say positive things about these guys.
But I'm just gonna say it for the first time. I'm gonna say no, and not in an awful way, not in like he's gonna be out of the league way. But is Darrell Henderson really that relevant going into 2021? Not really. And I just think that's kind of. I think Trey Sermon will have his games. He'll have times where he gets a decent workload and looks good doing it. But then there's going to be other times he's banged up and other guys get the opportunity and look better and he gets replaced a few years down the road.
Right.
So I think he's going to be a decent running back who's in the league for a little while, but I just don't see him being, a top 20 fantasy running back 4 years from now. I just think he'll be just a backup and just a guy in a committee approach or, that's my thoughts kind of.
So, I'm in the same boat with Alec here, and he has this kind of potential too, where he could easily find a great situation, and his all-around skill set benefits him to the point where he can put together some top 25, top 20 seasons. But I just think, like Alec said too, that the whole running back committee situation that's kind of taken over the NFL, I don't see him going somewhere and being a workhorse, and I think for that reason, and some of his limited big play ability too, Just all that factored in. I don't really see him being super relevant in fantasy in 3 to 5 years. Maybe a guy you can spot start here and there because of injury on whatever team he's at. Honestly, similar to kind of like Carlos Hyde has been the last few years, where you could play him sometimes and get great, fantasy value out of him, but I don't really see him being a workhorse starter anywhere. That being said, though, he's got potential, and like Hyde had potential too before he had, some injuries accumulate and all those things. So you never know, but I'm with Al on this one.
So real quick before we wrap up the show, just kind of another spark popped in my head as you were saying all that. Just an interesting landing spot that we didn't mention at all, but we've talked about this situation quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I know James Robinson's there, but if Trey Sermon landed in Jacksonville, how would you feel? Because, I just went on record saying I don't even love Trey Sermon that much. But honestly, if he landed in Jacksonville, Urban Meyer's there, got a little Ohio State blood, even though obviously they never overlap time-wise. But just the more college-style offense, and, he does have a little more juice than James Robinson does. Would he be a better fit in that offense, and could he possibly deliver more fantasy points?
I think that's an interesting one because I feel like he could. Again, like he could. I've seen James Robinson look really good this year too in the NFL. So I guess it's kind of up in the air. But I don't hate that destination for him. And I think he might be able to put together. And it's like we said, it's all situational in terms of guys like Trey Sermon, who aren't like these elite prospects. It doesn't matter. They transcend situation. I think, the right situation, he could have some really good value, and Jacksonville might be one of those spots. They have a very underrated offensive line.
They do. Yeah.
And they're going to be a lot more run dominant, you would think, just based on what we remember from Urban Meyer's college offenses, even though I'm sure he won't be calling plays or anything. That's an interesting thing to think about, and I'm sure all the James Robinson lovers are going to be at us in the chat for even assuming.
It might be.
I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it, Al. Do you got anything else?
Nothing else.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching, as always. Feel free to leave some comments. Tell us how wrong we are about Trey Sermon. Tell us how much you love James Robinson. All those good things. Give any suggestions for any other players you want to see us talk about. Leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as always, come join a Dynasty Fantasy Football League. You won't regret it. And I'm not just saying this because I'm a member of the team here, but it's the best way to play fantasy football. It really is. There's nothing like it. So, go join a league. Enjoy the next video that we put out, whichever one that is, and enjoy this one. And we will see you next time.
Stay safe, guys. Take care.